Hey, what's going on? What's up? What's up? What's up? Peace. What's up?
Hey, thank you for having me, Tiffany. Peace and Black Power, family. Thank you guys for having me, man. Thank you, Tiffany.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
thank you for being on here. Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you on here. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes, sir. All right, then. So, peace and power to the family out there. This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in effect. So tonight I have a special guest. His name is Brother Deshawn Coy. He also a founder of the organization called OPP, which means Original People Party, and he also written a book. You written a book called, and I have it on here. It's called "From the Ashes to Black Liberation." All right, so it's on Amazon, and you guys can check it out on Amazon. Actually, I have it on my Kindle. So, but
Thank you for supporting. I appreciate that, Tiffany.
oh yeah, yes, most definitely yes.
And then
All
also
right.
remember, just to let you guys know, let them know because you helped out of the you helped fact check and stuff like that. So I want
Yes,
to
I
appreciate.
did. Yes, I did. I did. Help with that as far as like send some additional information that I possibly could. So I hope you guys, if you guys have not checked out the book, you need to check it out. So it's on Amazon. How much is it on Amazon? The price?
Um, the physical copy is $12. The physical copy is $12, and the PDF the Kindle version is $10, around $10. So it's like
Okay,
it
then.
should be affordable for everyone. And then I think
Okay.
in a few months I might consider like lowering it just in case if people need to if it's a little expensive. But that's kind of the price for it right now. And the
Okay.
primary purpose of the book is for people who's coming into the organization who may want to join is to wait for us to be able to introduce people who may be like entry level members who may not be familiar with African history or Black history, and then it's like a 100-page book that gives you an easy way to kind of get reacclimated to the history of the last 500 years in less than 100 pages. So it goes over Africa, it goes over the slave trade, it goes over colonization, it goes over Jim Crow, it goes over decolonization, and also the modern system of oppression, like the war on drugs and stuff like that. So it goes through all of these different periods, and it's kind of very condensed, very easy to read, and in different categories. So that's kind of the purpose of the book to just kind of get
Okay.
people.
Okay. Yes. I
Mhm.
see that. So before I get to the book, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background. Where you from?
Yeah. So my name is Deshawn Coy. I'm originally was born in Brooklyn. I spent my childhood mostly in Brooklyn, and then I spent mostly my teenage and adult years in Queens. My family is from Grenada. My family's from Grenada, the island of
Oh,
Grenada.
your family from Grenada?
Yeah.
What? That's
My
funny
family
because we got since we on the topic about Grenada, we got to talk about what's his name? Maurice. Oh my God,
Bishop. Yes,
Maurice.
Maurice Bishop.
What's his last name?
Bishop.
Yeah, Maurice Bishop. We're gonna talk a little bit about him since,
Yeah.
but that's interesting. You from Grenada? Your family is from Grenada. Oh
Yeah.
wow.
My family's from Grenada, and I'm part of that generation of the firstborn. What did Tyreek initially call them? It said non FBA, non FBA. Yeah, I'm just saying.
Uh, uh,
Yeah, yeah. But I'm basically a first generation American, Black American of
okay.
him. So yeah,
Okay.
definitely.
Cool.
So, but
Cool.
my
That's
family
what's
originally
up.
from Grenada, and then I'm part of the first generation. And basically, like my inspiration to get into kind of like the African liberation or Black liberation work is that over the last few years I've been kind of like introduced first I was a Black capitalist. I was an aspiring Black capitalist. I was interested in becoming like a Mark Zuckerberg, developing apps and different type of things and stuff like that. But as time gone on, it's like when you see kind of like the police brutality cases kind of going on over and over, and then I started researching and started figuring out like what is the pattern of these things that keep happening, and then they keep there's police shooting, and then there's no conviction, and then you keep seeing the same pattern over and over and over. So that's kind of what kind of inspired me to
So is
kind of
that
get
what started?
into.
Is that what inspired you to start the OPP, or how long you had it, the organization?
Well, no, it not OPP, but it put me on a journey to research of what is the condition of why these things happening. So the way I got introduced is like into the conscious community, and the conscious community via someone, I'm not sure if you heard the name, is Boyce Watkins.
Yeah, I heard a voice walking.
Yeah, and Boyce Watkins was or currently he's kind of like promote this idea of like, getting businesses, and then lack of businesses, it doesn't the lack of businesses is what gives us the lack of control, right? In the community. But as I got more and more into what you would call the conscious community, or like researching Black history and stuff like that, I kind of went beyond just Black capitalism or just starting businesses and stuff like that. You're gonna have to research. I started going down the path of figuring out how to build systems to be able to solve these systemic problems that we have over and over. So that's kind of where I've gotten to. And then what the conclusion is what the original People's Party and what I created as a way to as a solution. So that's kind of how I this as the ultimate end point when I'm here where I'm at right now. Well,
Okay.
I say journey, I should say.
Okay.
Hmm.
Okay. Wow. Wow. So now, how long? When did you start the OPP, the original People's Party?
Uh, Officially, I would say about February, March. But I actually started really last August technically, because this, that's when I was doing ads, and I was doing like recruiting and stuff like that. And actually, some of the members who's in the group right now is with me from last August. So like, there's about 15 of us between New York and Georgia. So um, there's that's kind of how where I started in August, and then I kept recruiting, we kept recruiting and recruiting, and then early this year we came online, and then we kind of had a final meeting, like a meeting together, and then this past something like in June we met in person and stuff like that. And so right
Oh.
now we weren't in person, so we're going to work on the next meeting for in September, and then once we get the Georgia members together, we're going to do a meeting sometime in the fall again, so we can start putting the pieces together for like the actual agenda plan, stuff like that we're going to be doing. So that's kind of where I've been on this journey so far.
Okay, then. So now let's talk a little bit about your book. So this book
Mhm.
that you written called "From the Ashes to Black Liberation." Now, what
Mhm.
about the title? What made you decide to use the title "From Ashes to Black Liberation"?
Um, the inspiration for that title was kind of like the culmination of all these years of kind of just reading all of these books. If you see the back on the back of my wall, like in the back of my wall, I have all these books in the back wall where I've just
Mm-hmm.
been reading, where we kind of seen where our history from 500 years ago, where we kind of been slowly over centuries been defeated by our enemies in the West or in the Europeans and stuff like that, and we've kind of seen ourselves kind of beaten down to the point where every time we have our liberation movements or something like that, we've been having defeated. So the reason why I came up with this title was is kind of a way to present a solution and bring ourselves out of these problems. So from being defeated to liberation. So coming up with solutions and stuff like that. So that's kind of the idea of what from for the title. So we're moving forward from our that past history and moving forward. So that's the idea of it.
Oh, all right, cool, cool. Now I want to look at the first chapter just to give a sample of what the book is about. So, first chapter
Hmm.
is threats from the West. And it says before the 16th century, Africa consists of various empires, some consolidated or loosely associated with each other, either cooperatively for trade or through military conquest and expansion. Covering details such as formation, battles, trade, motivation would require in more in-depth analysis, which other books can better describe. For the purpose of this chapter, we will be summarizing the overview of Africa's history prior to and after European interference starting in the 1500s. Now, you said starting in the 1500s. Tell us what took place in the 1500s from what you studied.
Well, in the 1500s, or I should say, be more specific, around the 1450s or 1440s, the Spanish the Pope the Pope, I forgot, I think the name, Pope Nicholas the Fifth, he issued a paper bull where he sorry if I'm blanking my mind, but he issued a paper
It's
bull
okay.
and now giving permission for Spain and Portugal to enter the slave trade, which was kind of already going on with the Arabs already. So he put that out. So between the 1400s onward, you would see a an incursion or like an aggression from Europeans or Western Europe from getting involved in the slave trade, looking to expand their colonies or expand raw materials and stuff like that. And that's kind of piggyback to what I was saying earlier, where as the centuries went on, 1500 to 1600 to 1700s, you start seeing these raw materials being extracted and these colonies or these spheres of influence by the Europeans. So this is where around that time period of that's where European um, enslavement or the slave trade really began, from first starting with the Spanish and the Portuguese, with the
Mm-hmm.
Portuguese,
Yeah,
and then
yeah, yeah.
later on, as it started maturing, then you would have the British. Well, first the competition between Spain and Portugal first happened. That's when they were competing amongst each other in the West Africa. But then as France and as Britain became more mature and became more powerful, they eventually overtook the Spanish and the Portuguese from that slave trade. And then in the 18th or 19th century, the Germans became also competitors when that fight for 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 um, power in Africa, and then also overall in a global scheme. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. So yeah, you're right about the Portuguese and all, because like they was one of the first Europeans to go over to the African continent. Then all the other Europeans follow along the suit. Yeah.
Hmm.
So all right,
And then
and so
also
right,
when
go ahead.
oh, oh, sorry if I was cutting you off, but after when you guys read the book, you'll understand first before I go into the European slave trade, you also go into the Arab slave trade, where first because what happened before the European slave trade was also the Arab Muslim slave trade, where the I think it was in the 7th century or 642 when the Arabs first took over northern Africa and commenced the slave trade between Arabia and into northern Africa. So
You
that's
talking about the trans-Saharan slave trade?
yeah, with the Arabs in
Oh
northern
yeah,
Africa.
yeah, but
Yeah,
that happened
in
before the
the seventh
transatlantic
century.
slave trade.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So they when you guys read the book, you'll see that aspect of it. But yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, now I know right here where you got under historical overview of Africa. You said the continent was primarily divided as follows: sub-Saharan Africa below the Sahara Desert, where the majority
Hmm.
black or darker skinned population reside in or migrate throughout the continent's history. And it says Northern Africa consists of the minority population of mostly Arab slash Middle Eastern descent, according to historians such as Dr. Chancellor William, author of the classic book The Destruction of Black Civilization. Black African originally inhabited Northern Africa, with Egypt being considered among the earliest civilization in human history. Historian Sheikh Anta Diop affirmed this point in the African origin of civilization, arguing from what we know about the archaeology of South Africa, where humanity seems to have been born, from what we know about the Nubian civilization, probably the oldest of all. From what we know about the prehistory of the Nile Valley, we can legitimately assume that the Great Water is none other than the Nile, referring to Egypt and Ethiopia. However, as noted by William, due to abnormalities of the natural environment, which cause frequent migration, foreign encroachment, and other factors, those who ethnically identify as Arab, whose origin traced to the Middle East, led military conflicts throughout the region into northern Africa in the 7th century. All right, so right there, um, so I see that you use the work of Sheikh Anti Diop and Dr.
Hmm.
Chancellor William. What made you decide that they would be like their information would be good information for your book? What
Yeah.
made you decide to
So
use their work?
the scholars that I spoke to gave me those sources as the most credible so far. I know that Dr. Williams' work is a little bit more older, but those ancestors were probably the closest that give the kind of the archaeological information that provided for me the information about that. So yeah, that was kind of what I kind of used those as a thing. And then also I was watching speeches or interviews that Dr. Diop gave, and that's kind of where I get that source of information. And then also that also like in the beginning when I kind of made that reference to like being the original man or woman, that's kind of where the name of the original People's Party comes from. That's
Okay.
that's kind of where I got the idea when I read the book The African Origin of Civilization. That's kind of where I got the idea for we as the original People's Party. So that's the idea.
Okay. All right.
Uh-huh.
So now, um, oh, and then also here in the book, you also mentioned, and I ain't gonna read all of it, but it says
Uh-huh.
these military conquests resulted in the spread of Abrahamic religion of known as Islam and eventual Arab control of the northern Africa. With Islam taking hold in the north, this also brought the enslavement of African people by the Arab Muslim in the form of forced servitude to their Arab conquerors. And then you also got John Alimbia Azuma in the Legacy of Arab
Uh-huh.
Islam in Africa, describes the justification for African enslavement by stating Muslims, like their Western Christian counterparts centuries later, regard the enslavement of Black Africans as a blessing in disguise to the victim. Now, one may mean, what do they mean by as a blessing in disguise to the victim?
Well, I think as a justification for what they were doing, they were trying to use Islam or the way that they were trying to civilize those Africans and stuff like that. That's pretty much the meaning of the phrase as like a blessing in disguise. But really, it was just more of what in the Arabs was what the justification was to not just use for slave like labor, but also the justification for just using them as status within their Arab world to say that hey, I have this slave, and it indicated their status or with their class of having those type of thing. But that's kind of like the meaning of the blessing in disguise. Their justification or their idea of the enslavement or the justification, even though we know that is or Islam or what Islam is known as a peaceful religion and stuff like that. They were using that type of justification and stuff like that. Hmm.
Okay. So now, all right, regard to that. Okay, what about the fact that there were people who, when they did the trades and commerce during that time period, and they accepted Islam as, their religion, as their culture? What about those individuals? I mean, as far as the people in the sub-Saharan area,
Hmm. In West Africa or like in the
yeah,
North
in West
Africa.
Africa, yeah,
Yeah, well, because based on my research, that was to happen afterwards. That was more afterwards when the incursion and the kind of takeover or conquest of Northern Africa. That was just a little bit afterwards. But from my understanding, in West Africa, it wasn't forced as it was
right,
in the North. It wasn't forced and stuff like that. But that happened much later on in the centuries later on. So I don't really have and then also the point of me mentioning that in the book is not really something as an attack on Islam or stuff like that, but it's just to show the history of the origins of these particular religions or the people who adopt these things, or and what the purpose of what they were using these things to do and using it as weapons against the people. So yes, people in West Africa may have adopted it willingly and stuff like that, but in the North, where we as Black people or as African people were the original people who inhabited those areas prior to the 7th century. Um, After the 7th century and the influence of the Islam spread from the north or I should say from the East Africa, because in Ethiopia, in Sudan, particularly in Sudan, that there's a significant Muslim population from the east to the north, and then also this influence starts spreading to the west. So that's kind of how it operated. So yeah, that's kind of the purpose of why I put that in the book.
okay. Now,
Mm.
so going ahead, and we're going to talk about
Mm.
the work of Marcus Garvey. So today is Marcus Garvey's birthday, right?
Happy birthday to the
And
ancestors, man.
yeah, happy birthday to him. So I have one of his books right here, which is The Wise Mind of Marcus Garvey. Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's some things that he had written in this book, and I think that it is very And I just want to ask you, from your
Is that a
perspective.
book? Is that a book that he wrote or Garvey wrote?
Well, yeah, it's like with all his speeches and stuff.
Oh, with his speeches. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Because I know that his wife Amy Garvey, she helped wrote a book and helped the philosophies and also Garvey and Garveyism and stuff like that.
Yeah. So in this book right here,
Mm-hmm.
um, now let's look at the one that says great ideas know no nationality. And he said, all intelligent people know that one's nationality has nothing to do with great ideas and great principle. If because I am Jamaican, the Negro should not accept the principle of race, rights, and liberty, or the idea of a free and independent race, then you may well say that because Jesus was a Nazarene, the outside world should not accept his doctrine of Christianity because he was alienated or alien. Because Martin Luther King was, I mean, excuse me, Martin Luther, sorry, because Martin Luther was born in Germany, the world should not accept the doctrine of Protestantism. Because Alexander Hamilton and Lafayette were not born in America, Americans should not accept and appreciate the benefits they bestow upon the nation. All right. And it says,
Mm-hmm.
because macaroni or Marconi was Italian, we of the New World should not make use of wireless telegraphy. Again, I say great principle, great ideas, no nationality. Now, what's your thought on that statement?
I think what Garvey was saying, based on the history remember, is that during his rise and when he came here to New York or to into Harlem, is that he was being attacked for trying to advocate for self alliance, self like race first aspect of his politics amongst the existing black population. But because he was a Jamaican and because of his accent and all these type of things, they were attacking him because of his being a non-black, kind of like what we were saying earlier about with the Tariq Nasheed, with the
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that.
FBA thing. They were using they were people organizations like the NAACP, the Urban League, and all these let's say the communists or stuff like that. They were all attacking Garvey because of his, and then using the fact that he's a Jamaican national coming here trying to talk to black people or talking, or especially his rhetoric, talking down to black people. But in his rhetoric is more just an excuse to not listen to the message of what he was saying and what he was advocating for. So that's kind of why in that passage what you gave, why they were why Garvey was making that explaining that, and why you can't use his rhetoric or use his ideas and stuff like that for our liberation efforts. So that's kind of the reason why he was explaining that in that passage or in that speech. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what he was, yeah, from what I understand of it, basically what he was saying that look, we are all African descended people. We should be able
Mm-hmm.
to do something that's going to bring us closer so we can be able to share a commonality, be able to have common ideas and things that's going to help the people. And I think he used a great example in that book. Now, getting to the concept, we hearing all this argument about who's black and who ain't black and stuff. Now, let's start with the Egyptian, North African people and stuff like that. You
Yeah.
know, you heard the argument about people making commentaries about the Egyptian weren't black, and then there are those who say that there are those who there's some Egyptian that was black, and there's some Egyptian that was mixed or biracial, or whatnot. And there was those who say, well, the Egyptian people now identify themselves as black. The people in sub-Saharan never identify themselves as black, etc. What is your take on that? Now, we do know that, yes, they do go by tribes, but in the modern
Absolutely.
era, more and more younger people or people in our age group, they identify themselves as being black because me and them have subscribed to the concept of Pan-Africanism as well.
Mm.
So, what do you think when you hear people arguing about the term black and all of this?
So I'm gonna address those two parts because the Egypt thing and then also the identity of black. So the first thing with the Egypt thing, if you guys look at the book or like the references that we just gave, like um Chancellor Williams or Dr. Diop, you will see based on their information on their research, it clearly identifies that there was a Nubia or black Egypt before as right what it is now with the Arabs and stuff like that, and they existed for centuries prior to any Arab or any foreign contact and stuff like that. So that's just to answer the question when it comes to the Egypt thing. Now, when it comes to the rest of Northern Africa, where contemporarily, that would be something separate question that we would have to address a little bit afterward. But but when it comes to the idea of what was the second question you had about? You said about who is black or who's not, and stuff like that. Or sorry if I messed it up. Uh,
Okay.
oh, sorry. Yeah, you because I was gonna ask it like that. You could repeat that second question about the black about the who's black or who's black or not.
Okay, so
Yeah.
there's been arguments about the term black. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So people make an argument that, oh, the Egyptian people weren't black. Then you have those who make the argument about the sub-Saharan African people, the people in the continent, they never identified themselves as black, which is true. We know that at one point in time
Mm-hmm.
they didn't identify themselves as black because they went by tribes. So the term
Mm-hmm.
black per se was not used in the modern terminology that we use it today, or colloquial term.
Yeah.
But
So
however, go ahead.
yeah. My understanding is that the identity and the ideas of what of like an ethnicity or like a race aspect really started turning in the 1800s, where people like damn, Delaney. Why am I missing his name? Delaney from New York. He was one of the first black nationalists. I'm forgetting his name.
You
I'm
talking
sorry.
about Martin Delaney?
Martin Delaney. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
Martin Delaney. People such as Martin Delaney or even the Haitian Revolution before Delaney, these ideas and these moments in history is what um, created the identity or the thing or the movement towards a race consciousness as a way as a solution to the African problem or the historical problem that's going on in our community. And shout out to Jimmy, man, because that's one of my members of the group. But yeah, um, so to go back to the question you were saying, over the last 2 centuries, this is when these things started coming in together and coming as a potential solution for us as African people or descendant people on the continent to be able to unify to ourselves together. So that's kind of where these things really come as a whole. So that's why today or in the last century or more, you see this consciousness amongst Black people or Black African people or descendants, and looking for ways to come together. That's why primarily when Marcus Garvey launched the organization, he was able to attract about 4 million people between the U.S. and over in Africa because this similar racial consciousness was very prevalent. Even to a certain extent, and when the Nation of Islam came together, like in the mid 1930s, this is what something also happened where this similar race consciousness really picked together. So, you know, the people who's arguing about who's black or who's not and stuff like that, it's kind of arbitrary and really just for me personally just nonsense. It's all distraction from us really coming together to find solutions to the overall problem for our people. So
All right. Right, absolutely. I agree. It is a distraction. It's a serious distraction,
mm-hmm,
especially if we're talking about bringing about liberation and helping our people and things like that.
mm-hmm,
So also, I'm going to read another session that
yeah,
Garvey wrote. Is what it's in here. It says, "I am a Negro." And it says, I am a Negro. I make absolutely no apology for being a Negro because my God created me to be what I am. And as I am, so will I return to my God, for he knows just why he created me as he did. So, gentlemen, you will understand that behind the whole business proposition lies the spirit of the movement. I have no time to go into the work of Universal Negro Improvement Association, but I will. But I say this: I know there are certain people who do not like me because I am black. They don't like me because I am not born here through no fault of mine. It says, I then bring myself into this Western world. The history of my race. I was brought here. I was sold to some slave master in the island of Jamaica, some Irish slave master who subsequently gave my great grandfather his name. Garvey is not an African name, it is an Irish name. As Johnson is not an African name. Garcia is not an African name. Thompson, Tobias are not African names. Where did we get those names from? We inherit them from our own slave masters. English, French, Irish, or Scotch. So if I was born in Jamaica, it was no fault of mine. It was because the slave ship which took me to Jamaica did not come to American ports. That is how some Negroes of America were not born in the West Indies. We did not come here of our own free will. We were brought here. So the question of birth does not enter into the question of the Negro. It was a matter of accident. Will you blame me for an accident? Excuse me. Will you blame me for the accident of being a Jamaican Negro and not an American Negro? Surely you will not. But there is a bigger question involved. Is it a question of race? What are you going to do with this question of race? You may sit quietly by, but is it going to be serious later on? And that is why the Universal Negro Improvement Association is enduring to assist you in solving the Negro problem by helping the Negro to become enterprising independently, politically, and by having a country of his own. All
Yeah,
right. So
that
now,
was that was beautifully put right there. What Garvey just said himself. It was beautifully put because this type of going back and forth and stuff like that, trying to say who's black or who's not. Garvey just explained it right there and stuff like that.
right.
Now,
And that goes
so
into the concept about the ADOS and the FBA movement.
mm-hmm,
So you see there's the conflict with the ADOS got conflict with the Pan African,
mm-hmm,
and then the FBA got a conflict with both ADOS and the Pan African movement. All right.
yeah,
So when you see what's going on here and you see the tactics that's taking place,
mm-hmm,
all right, we got to talk about the current state of black people in America, or just black people in general, or particularly us in America, because where you at, you in New York, all right, and
mm-hmm,
you're in a city where there is a lot of diversity of black people, people that are black people that are Haitian, black people that are Bahamian, Jamaican,
mm-hmm,
Grenadian, like yourself, and people who
mm-hmm.
are Guyanese, um, just in Dominican and things like that. I mean, by you growing up, how was it like, just being around a different diverse of black people? I mean, did you ever experience that problem growing up? Ever feeling like you was outcast by black Americans because your ancestors now descendants of of America, as far as like they weren't enslaved here in this country, which
Yeah.
I know.
To my to my knowledge, no. Like and when we was like in second grade and stuff like that, maybe we would hear some certain jokes and stuff like that where you would go talk about African booty scratches and all these type of things. But as we got older and stuff like that, in my experience, I had people who were Jamaicans who were classmates. You had people who were actual Black Americans, but I didn't even know at that time that they were. What I'm saying? Because as I get older, that's when like stuff like that. But I didn't even know my neighbors and stuff like that. It was never really that type of thing. I never really experienced that being excluded from other Black Americans stuff like that.
Right.
Now in high school, I remember that. I know there were certain cliques. You would have the Haitians in high school. Like I remember in high school, they would have the Haitians there. You would have the Jamaicans there and stuff like that. And then then you had to have the whole mix of them, stuff like that. But they would never really something that was like some type of beef or some type of hostility or stuff like that, to my knowledge. Or stuff. No, it was never something like that.
So, do you think FBA and ADOS is bringing about a divide and conquering amongst Black people with their ideology? Because
Yeah, yeah, in general, yes. But the thing is with the ADOS thing is that I know you may disagree with me or others may disagree with me, but I think amongst the ADOS, particularly the ADOS people, I think there's certain members or certain constituency that actually genuinely care about actual reparations. They actually care about the issue and stuff like that. But the
right,
problem is that the people who influence them, someone like a Yvette Carnell or Tony Moore, they may be influencing them trying to say that these Africans who's from the diaspora or either from the Caribbean or from the continent taking our they're taking their jobs or they're taking their opportunities, even though the stats and like the reality is not not really there to really substantiate that. So that's why I kind of feel like when you mix that type of rhetoric and stuff like that, they maybe get influenced in that. But I don't really think the not all of them, because I know some of them. It's like on social media, they're very aggressive, and then they're telling you not ADOS, stuff like that. But once you deprogram them a little bit, and then you try to expose some of the rational ones, they can be converted. I remember having like a guy named Diallo a few years ago. I was having a debate with him like a month ago where I was talking about that, and he was telling me like, no, you cannot convert these people and stuff like that. But I don't necessarily share the same view. I just think that they're kind of somewhat misguided. Now, when it comes to the FBA people, to me, like when it comes to like Tariq Nasheed, to me that's more of just a hustle where you're just using a derivative of what ADOS is to kind of capitalize in on it when you don't really have any type of tangible reparations plan and stuff like that. There's no unless I'm missing something because I've been following it. I haven't seen any tangible reparations plan that FBA is really coming out with. So that's why when it comes to the FBA thing, I don't really believe in that type of thing. But I do believe some like some of the ADOS people they actually genuinely care about reparations and they want a solution and stuff like that. But you know, I'm not sure on the status of what type of plan ADOS or like people ADOS and Yvette Carnell are doing right now. But maybe you could tell me more. But to me, yeah, that's kind of my position on that.
Okay, yeah. So the ADOS feel like the Pan African movement is dead, and
Mm-hmm.
that Pan Africanism is not going to do anything for Black people, and when it comes to reparation. So here's the thing about the reparation. If we go back into studying history about Republic of New Africa, right? They have an
Mm-hmm.
organization which is called Encobra. So
Yep.
Encobra, it was the purpose of bringing about the talk of reparation on the table, which is the HR 40 bill. And that was introduced in 1989 by the late John Conyers, who was
Mm-hmm.
the Democratic representative from Michigan. So
Mm-hmm.
with that being said, they did do something. Queen Mother Moore. I don't know if you're familiar with Queen Mother Moore.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah, she was one of the few people that was very active in that. So, with that being the case, what I'm saying, they did something. They did what they could, but you can only do so much because at the end of the day, it's up to the government to either give us reparation or not. And for me, I don't see a reparation ever taking place in this time period. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I don't see us ever getting that the trillions of dollars that we looking for. I don't see it happening. Not in this day of life. Maybe later on, but not in this day of life.
Yeah.
And especially with a lot of things that's going on right now. We got a lot to deal with this pandemic that we're in, the coronavirus and the Delta variant disease and stuff. So reparation is not going to be the main focus
Yeah.
of
So
the subject. So
yeah, and I think it's because the problem is that the people who's following Yvette Carnell or like Antonio Moore and stuff like that, they're a little bit younger, so they come onto online or to on YouTube to get exposed to these type of information, but they don't really do the necessary research to understand what happened or the people who's already involved in the organization. So that's why when they hear of some organization like in Cobra, if you're not part of this conscious community or like an activist or something like that, you may not even heard of what Encobra is. Like if I go outside right now and I tell someone on the block about that Encobra, they probably never heard of it. And that's kind of like the average person who's coming into these spaces and stuff like that. They don't know what Encobra is, so that they don't know the information or the history behind it. So that's why I say that that's where kind of like a little bit of the ignorance come from. They don't really know the people who was already doing this. And when it comes to actually getting reparations, like what you were talking about, I have similar doubts too because when you look at the primary constituency who Black people votes for, which is the Democratic Party, um, when you look at that constituency, who votes for the Democratic Party, who's supposed to be the representatives of our people, like the CBC, the Congressional Black Caucus, and all the type of individuals who's supposed to represent us. I don't really see them having the political courage or the backbone to really push that type of agenda. Because when you look at how politics work, you know how the white power structure kind of operates. They primarily bankroll these politicians and stuff like that. So the fact that we even get something like a study on a bill that can't even get a vote, you know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? Um,
yeah, I understand what you're saying, yo.
Yeah, it's not even a bill for reparation, like an actual tangible bill. It's just a study of a bill, HR 40, right? Yeah,
Yeah,
so
HR 40
HR,
bill.
yeah, HR 40. It's not just a study to get on that, and that to me, it's like I don't see the political organization amongst the grassroots, amongst our people, strong enough to be able to counter that. Because the money in politics and all these different type of things, that's kind of what I've seen. It's kind of really the the building, no, the a hurdle for us to be able to tackle to really get reparations and stuff like that. And that's why I kind of got to that point about a year and a half ago where I kind of just said, okay, if we can't get reparations, if we can't really get these political leaders to kind of engage on us politically to be able to get your so-called white allies in the Democratic Party to do something tangibly on behalf of Black America, then that's why I came up with the idea for the original People's Party as something that's tangibly can deliver material benefits for the community directly over time, of course, stuff like that. So that's kind of why I got to that point because I don't really have that much confidence personally of these politicians to really do something tangibly for our people, stuff like that.
Okay, somebody put on the car. And shout out to Brother Bakari. Thank you for coming through, Brother Bakari. He put here, Black people really want or feel we deserve reparation. We got to fight. We have to make sacrifice. We have to unite, organize, and strategize for power, not equality. Or I think he's trying to say equality. Yeah. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I agree. You
So
really have to strategize. And go ahead. What was you
oh,
saying?
sorry, go ahead. I cut you off. Sorry.
Oh, nah,
I was just saying
you
like an idea of what. Go ahead. Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
yeah, I was saying that you have to bring some type of strategy, and this is a time where if you really want that, you will have to organize with other Black people, even those who are considered as children of immigrants. You would have to organize with them. You know what I'm saying? But if you really look into the history of slavery, slavery was not just a United States of America business. Slavery was an international business. Okay. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't just United States. So you have to look at that from an international standpoint. All right. We're talking about the transatlantic, the middle passage, all of that was international. And then you had
Mm-hmm.
slaves that was brought into the Caribbeans. And not only they were brought into the Caribbeans, they were sent over from the Caribbeans to America. So there were some slaves that came directly from the continent, and then there were those that came from the Caribbean. But see, a lot of us don't know that. So while our people here in America sitting up here looking down on Caribbean immigrants or those who are descendant of parents or parents or grandparents who are Caribbean background, you may have some Caribbean relatives or ancestors. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? So it's a lot that you got to go into. You know what I'm saying? Like for me, when I took my ancestry, I found out I had some Caribbean in me. I had ancestors somewhere in Jamaica. So but I was told that
Oh
my
wow, I didn't know that.
paternal,
Wow.
I was told that my paternal great grandfather, he was from the Bahamas. So it's a possibility
Mm-hmm.
chance that he was probably from Jamaica, but he moved to a place like Bahama. I don't know. But it's according to my DNA, this was what 23 Me, and that's where I found out. So, what I'm saying, that tells a story right there, even when you look at your lineage. Now, and speaking of that, you got people who are FBA and ADOS saying that they're not African or African descent. What is your stance on that?
I don't even know how to answer that because it's like assuming that you have two predominantly Black parents, most of us have um ancestry that traced back to West Africa or Central Africa. So to me, it's like I can't even answer that type of question to these people, to these ADOS people or these FBA people saying these type of things. But again, I think that they're saying anything out of ignorance because they're being they're coming brand new to YouTube or to these online spaces, being introduced to this information without reading the history of this, like let's say in this book that I have, having the basic fundamentals of like the slave trade and all these type of things. They don't have these basic fundamentals, stuff like that. But if I wanted to go back to the question about the reparations, if you could I, um,
What? Go
with,
ahead.
with Brother Bakari, um, one of the ideas that what OPP had is that to be able to position ourselves to get reparations. The idea I had was a working idea. It's not something that's solid yet, but it was something that about using a potential strategy that Dr. Claude Anderson was talking about. You heard of Dr. Claude Anderson?
Yes, I know about Dr. Clark Anderson. Yes.
Yeah. So in his book Powernomics, in the political section in the book, he talked about how if we could register our people like in the South or throughout the country as independent voters, and if you congregate them around certain areas like in Texas or in Georgia or in like South Carolina, you can organize the vote to and as an independent vote where we can vote as a block of 200,000, 300,000, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And by doing that, you can use that as a way to leverage the political vote as an alternative to having to depend on the Democratic Party and stuff like that to be able to do that. So you could either vote for Democrats, Republicans, or stuff like that. And also what Anderson was saying, you don't have to necessarily run your own candidate. You could just use the power of the vote to organize it. Um, by voting as an independent, like um, removing yourself from the Democratic Party and becoming independent and building independent blocks of votes in each state. That's kind of his idea, stuff like that. Even Malcolm X spoke about that in the '60s too. He spoke about independent vote. But the reason why I brought that up is because as a potential solution to get reparation, we can use that type of political power to be able to leverage it. That was an idea, what I'm saying. So that's an idea that we had that we're discussing, but we have to do more research on it. There's certain mechanics about politics that we have to work on to research and stuff like that. But yeah, you could tell me what you think.
Okay. Yeah, and you're right. Because for me, I can't rock with being Democratic or Republican. So I'm like
Hmm.
more so, I'm very independent because I
Yeah,
feel like this. I have to look at the agendas. You know what I'm saying? Just like the Republican got some negative side of them, the
yeah,
Democratic got negative side of them as well. So you gotta look at the agendas of each candidates or politician, see what line up with you. So for me, I can't say I want to be a Democrat. I want to be a Republican. I would rather be independent. Now I
yeah,
know here also in your book, going back to your book, you wrote about the basic economics. You talk about economics. So you
yeah,
said to properly understand the economic undercurrents that was pushing this European competition and eventual domination of Africa, esteemed Pan-Africanist Walter Rodney, author of How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, explains how the earlier economic system that preceded capitalism and the elements that feed the belly of the beast for that system to keep functioning. The economic system that Africa and the rest of the known world operated under was first communalism, where the property was collectively owned, the work was common to all, and goods were shared equally. So, and the next system was slavery in its early from where people would become slaves either by leveraging societal penalties, for example, crime or debt, or with the primary responsibility being to produce food. And following this is feudalism. Feudalism was implemented where the workers worked agriculture for their livelihood while the land was owned by a few and claimed large share of the profits and wealth generated. So, and then you go on to talk about finally, this led to the evolution to the contemporary system called capitalism, where instead of an agriculture based system, goods would be produced by machines, factories, and mines with the same feudal ownership structure. Now, out of all these economic systems, right, which one you think will be more beneficial to Black people as a collective?
well, in my opinion, I think communalism would work, but not in the traditional sense of how communalism, because as centuries passed since communalism has stopped, as communalism from prior, the world and the habits and the traits of our people has changed, not just as Black people, but the overall world, where we're kind of used to a certain way of living and a certain way of lifestyle and stuff like that. So, um, so I think communalism would work, but it would have to be in a more modern context. And later on, when we speak about the OPP agenda, I'm going to explain how that modern context would work in the worker cooperative model. But I would say communalism, but in more of a modern perspective, because slavery is not necessarily democratic or
Right.
humanitarian, and feudalism is more of a structure where you would have a small minority who control the who control the wealth or stuff like that. So that's kind of like, in my opinion, mostly communalism would probably work, but in more in a modern context.
Okay. And then, so now, there's people that support capitalism, right? You
Mm-hmm.
got some black people that say capitalism is good for black folks, and there's some people say capitalism is not good for black folks. Now, do you think capitalism has some benefits for black people? Yes or no?
I would
And
say
why
no.
or why
I
not?
would say I would say no. I mean, if you have access to capital to be able to, if you're assuming like if as an individual, if you have access to capital to be able to build a business and be able to be profitable within the local market or the national in the national market, it could be beneficial. But when it comes to the masses of the people, especially in the international arena that we're in, I don't believe capitalism is something that could be applicable to things because if you are a small business and you're trying to compete with corporations or monopolies who has access to capital who can afford to be profitable for a few years but then go not go profitable for a couple of years and then have the banks or the central banks or their banks be able to bail them out and then they could restart the whole system again. As a small business, if we were to start a small business, that thing cannot necessarily work because you don't have access to capital to be able to expand the business. That's number one. And then number two, if your business happens to go belly up, if you're not closest to the Federal Reserve or Wall Street or all these type of different institutions, you're not going to be able to number one compete or to be able to have access to a market share or like a certain market share, or you're not going to be able to hold yourself and sustain yourself and stuff like that because it's not meant for you to do that because the overall system of capitalism is mostly concentrated mostly here in the West amongst a certain small white minority or globalist or whatever stuff like that, and then all here in America, and then also the same in Europe, where that's where most of the capital is concentrated. So if you don't have access to that type of thing, it's not going to be able to trickle down to the rest of the community, whether you're black or not, because you don't have access to those type of things to be able to, you know, necessarily expand or be able to expand employment to get those material benefits to the others and stuff like that. And then also that's also assuming if you want to create jobs and stuff like that. Because sometimes as a capitalist, your first individual goal is to maximize profit for yourself, number one, and or more importantly or more broadly for your shareholders and stuff like that. That's the primary objective, particularly here in this country. That's the mentality. So that's why I kind of say that capitalism. To sorry if I was giving a long-winded answer, but
No,
that's
you
kind of a
good.
that's kind of why I personally don't see capitalism as something that can be applicable to the masses of the people. But if you're an individual and you have access to capital, you can do it. If you're Jay Z or something like that, you could do that.
Right, right, right. I see where you're coming from with that. Now, at one point in time, a lot of people used to support communism and socialism. What do you think of those two ideology, communism and socialism? Now, some people say that pretty much they're interchangeable, but there is some difference because
This is
socialism
different.
is like the mixed economy, like a little bit of capitalism, a little bit of communism, and communism is something totally different. What are your thoughts on that? When our people, back in that time period, like the Black Panther Party and all the other black groups out there, black organizations, social group, they was their idea was centered around communism at one point.
Mhm.
Why? What is your thought on it?
Now, I'm gonna try to go from my memory, and because when I've spoken to a couple of communists, black communists and stuff like that, I'll try to get their information and stuff like that to get like their understanding of communism. It's kind of like different answers and stuff like that. So I'm just gonna go off based on my understanding of what I read about communism and stuff like that. Traditionally, communism come out of what is known as Marxism, from a guy named Karl Marx, who came up with certain critiques of European capitalism, stuff like that, and its development of capitalism. And what Marx did, he came up with these series of books called Capital, where he kind of, or I think I forgot the Communist Manifesto. I'm not sure which one, but he came up with these certain books that gave a critique of capitalism. These books gave influence to what something that's called communism today, where there's going to be collective ownership of the natural resources or the means of production and stuff like that. So that's one aspect of communism. And then to be able to get that done, you would have to have a revolution to be able to get to overthrow the government to be able to get access to those means of production and stuff like that. So that's kind of my understanding of communism, of how it operates. But when it comes to advocating for revolution or these type of communist type of things, these things, in my opinion, and I'm just speaking from my perspective, they're not really necessarily realistic. But let me first address the Marxist aspect, because typically, from my understanding of Marxism, is that typically I agree with a lot of Marx critiques of capitalism, where a small minority is controls most of the capital or the means of production or the overall workplace, stuff like that. I agree with those aspects. But the problem is that a lot, particularly historically, when it comes to like black markets and stuff like that, they have a tendency of emphasizing the class aspect versus the race aspect over prioritizing. You know what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? Like the class aspect from the economic stuff and how the means of, how the wealth is shared amongst the society. You understand what I'm saying?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's kind of the idea with the class aspect. But to me, when it comes to certain black Marxists and stuff like that, they seem to downplay or not just black Marxists but also communists. They downplay that race aspect because it out of they downplay it because they want to have international solidarity with the working class of the world, whether they're white, black, Asian, and stuff like that. But the problem with me and my disagreement with these type of things is that it's not necessarily proven in history where you would have the Soviets. Like if I have to provide some more sources, but the Soviet Union broke off from the Chinese when it was when it comes to certain ideological differences, and the Chinese broke away or not or rescinded their support of the Angolan independent movement at certain times when it was beneficial. And the reason why I give you different type of examples is that not necessarily international solidarity is what's going to hold together a movement. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of what I have this disagreement with these type of Marxist or type of communist ideology and stuff like that. It downplays the aspect of race and racial discrimination and all these type of things and the history behind it. So that's kind of where my disagreement with Marxism and communism and stuff like that. Even though I do agree with certain aspects economically where you have to encourage worker ownership of the actual um, jobs or businesses that they're operating in. Hopefully, I didn't talk too long or stuff like that.
Oh no, you good, you good, you good, you good. So there's a book that you wanted me to look into, and it's a lot
Mm-hmm.
of pages in this book.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
book right here, and I'm gonna pull it up for the people to see.
mm-hmm.
So this book is called "Tragedy and Hope: A History of the World in Our Time" by Carol Quigley. So in
Mm-hmm.
this book, so let me ask you this: what was your reason for using this book? Like, what was your purpose? What inspired you to start looking into this book?
Well, the reason why I was looking into this book is because I was trying to study geopolitics outside of the African perspective. Because over the last 2 3 years, I've been studying a lot of books from Eric Williams, Walter Rodney, Kwame Nkrumah, and all these type of things, trying to understand the geopolitics of African people. But was what kind of led me to that book was kind of like a book that I was reading before that. It was book. You ever heard of a book called The Creatures from Jekyll's Island?
The who?
The Creatures from Jekyll's Island.
I never heard that
Um,
book. Who's the
it's a
author?
creature from like it talks about the founding of the Federal Reserve and how the central banks interact with international capitalism to be able to extract wealth and stuff like that. But that's where I got the source for the Tragedy and Hope book.
Okay,
So
what's the? Oh, I'm sorry. What's the author name?
G. Edward, I'm blanking his name. G. Edward. I found his last name. Griffin. There you go. G. Edward Griffin.
G. Edward Griffin. And what's the name of his book?
The creature of the creature from Jekyll Island. The creature from Jekyll Island. The founding of the Federal Reserve. Yeah.
Okay.
So to go back to the Tragedy and Hope book, the reason why I got the book is because I wanted to learn more of the geopolitical aspect and the history of European capitalism and how it interacted with our people as African people. And first, when I was reading the Williams book, the Rodney book, and and in the Nkrumah book, it gave me an understanding of how the exploitation was operated from the 1500s, and kind of like similar to what I explained in the book, how it operated and what the purpose of it and stuff like that, right? But the reason why, because I remember I was messaging you about the certain passages of the book. The reason why I was so excited and why I love the book for is because it goes deeper than just what the books I just mentioned before about the logic and the purpose and the maneuvers and stuff like that they were using to be able to implement this international system of exploitation from the 1500s onwards. From starting as, I think if I remember correctly, he was using like certain terms with different stages of capitalism, where you would have mercantile capitalism, you would have certain individual capitalism, and then eventually when he talks about financial capitalism, and then kind of where we are right now is also called like monopoly capitalism, where essentially the to kind of summarize it, a quick summary is that basically what happened between the 20th century and now is that the stage in where we are in monopoly capitalism is that basically the banks, the capitalists and the globalists, they basically use their control over the Federal Reserve and the central banks in Europe and in America to be able to use that capital to be able to buy industries or stuff like that, buy industries and stuff like that, and use those industries and using the core, like the interconnecting of those of the paper money that they print or the fiat money they print, and then on the other hand, also the industry that they control on one hand, and then using those two things together to be able to print money freely to go ahead and finance these type of operations or invest in these type of industries or to lend or to loan debt to other countries and stuff like that, and then using this to kind of create like a global order of exploitation around the world. And then you kind of see how these type of things operate when you read that book. But hopefully you get the idea of what I'm saying.
Okay, so when you get into this book right here,
Yeah,
all right, so let's just look at okay, so let's look at the one about economics.
yeah.
Um,
If you give me a second, I'll go get. Let me see if I get my copy of the book real quick. Hold up.
okay.
Just give me a second. Yeah, I'm back.
All right.
Yeah. No, but go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. Because I was gonna just skim through what I was gonna say.
Okay, so what chapter you about to show?
Let me see. Now I'm gonna just see if I can find an example because I have so many citations here. But
Okay.
basically, I'm just gonna use an example like how these type of things were used to, to do them. So I was gonna use like Russia and Japan as an example because I can't find it right away right here in the book. But basically, what because Japan or like particularly Russia was very poor, right?
Uh-huh.
Because they didn't have the necessary technology or the raw material to be able to develop, Russians had to depend on Europe because countries like Britain, France, Belgium, Germany, all these different type of countries, they already had surplus of capital to be able to do these things. But in places like Russia or China and stuff like that, they didn't have those access to capital to be able to get the engineers or to get the necessary resources to be able to train to build not just the economy or the industrialize, but also the military to be able to compete with their European counterparts in the West. So by if I get a chance later on, it's kind of or just to summarize, this is how they were able to be able to develop themselves over time. And it's similar when you read this book, you'll see how the same pattern was done to Japan, to China, and other places where they were able to use the same tactic where they have to go borrow loans or have to go get access to capital, basically, to get those resources or to get those training to be able to develop their industries, which their industries translated into their military, stuff like that. but it took time for them to do that because they had to go into debt. They had to go get access to foreign currencies and stuff like that, or the foreign markets or the forex stuff like that, to be able to finance their development and stuff like that. Let me see.
Okay, so let me just read something from one of the chapters in this book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's look at cultural evolution and civilization.
Mm-hmm.
So now in this book, the author goes in and says there has always been men who have asked, "Where are we going?" But never it would seem have there been so many of them. And surely never before have these myriads of questioners asked their question in such dolorous tone or rephrased their question in such despairing words. Can man survive? Even on a less cosmic basis, questioners appear on all sides seeking meaning or identity, or even on the most narrowly egocentric basis, trying to find myself. One of these persistent questions is typical of the 20th century rather than of earlier times. Can our way of life survive? Is our civilization doomed to vanish, as did that of the Incas, the Sumerians, and the Romans? From Giovanni Battista Vico in the early 18th century to Oswald Spengler in the early 20th century and Arnold J. Tanobi in our own day, men have been puzzling over the problem whether civilization have a life cycle and follow a similar pattern of change. From this discussion has emerged a fairly general agreement that men live in separately organized society and each with its own distinct culture, that some of these societies have writing and city life exists on a higher level of culture than the rest and should be called by the different term civilization, and that these civilizations tend to pass through a common pattern of experience. Now stop
Mm.
right there.
Uh,
Let's build on that.
uh, oh yeah, yeah. Afterwards, I think I found the citation, the page when I was going to use that. But go ahead. Yeah,
Okay, let's go ahead and build on that information, that part.
yeah. Because I think in that part in the book, because I read that part, because I think when the author was talking about is that he was kind of like giving over a historical overview over the progress of civilization and figuring out how does man survive and stuff like that. So that's kind of like what he was writing about, because throughout the whole book, it's the same. It's the same pattern where he's talking about how does man be able to survive or stuff like that. And do you have the acts or the places that where you resist, and let's say in Europe where it's not very raw material based and stuff like that. Or how you doing, Centavos? I hope I pronounced that properly.
Centavo.
Yeah, yeah. So, um, so not having access to raw materials and stuff like that, which also influence the militarism to be able to go out to get access to raw materials. And throughout the book, he discusses that in the book how that progress happened little by little, where the Europeans developed, become more aggressive and stuff like that to get access to these raw materials to be able to develop themselves and stuff like that. So that's kind of what the book discusses, how that progress happens over time. So yeah.
Basically going into how civilization went about going through the process of getting into wars, invasion to have have power and influences and gain wealth, basically.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's
that's the
always been
idea.
the thing. So it's always, when you that's the main thing that war is about. War is about power and wealth.
Hmm.
So when people go into having wars with each other, they want the power and they want the wealth and they want the resources. So that's
Hmm.
what they're gonna do. That's the main key.
Yeah, and when you read this book, you'll see how that pattern. I'm telling you, when he describes it, he describes how that pattern operates throughout history very clearly, from the British, from the French, to all these different powers and stuff like that, little by
Right.
little and stuff like that. So I'll give an example of how that type of development was happening, because if you want to go to it, like I'm not sure, because there's a different. Sometimes there's a difference between the book and the PDF. But if it's page 22, or let me see if this, I'm gonna find a chapter. Try
Okay.
try to look and see if it's page um 92,
What's the
92,
chapter?
92. Let me see. Let me look at the chapter. Let me see. Chapter 3. The
Okay,
Russian
chapter three.
Empire,
Chapter
chapter
three,
three.
Russian Empire. Okay.
Yeah. Do they have the pages at the end of it, like toward the end of it, or not?
Nah, but it says
No, no.
97 at the bottom because
Uh,
I'm on the Adobe.
oh yeah, Adobe. Let me see.
Yeah, but I see chapter three, the Russian Empire to 1917.
So let me see real quick. I was gonna see if you could try to follow along, but let me see. Let's see. Chapter three. Scroll down a little bit.
Okay.
Because sometimes they have like certain subtext, but don't worry, I'll just read those. I'll just read a short part. So
Okay.
I'll just read the short part. So the serfs were impoverished at the liberation and held at a low standard of living by having a large part of their produce taken from them as rents to the landlords and as taxes to the state bureaucracy. This this served as a this served to drain a considerable fraction of the country's agricultural and mineral production to the cities to the export market. Now, this fraction provided capital for the growth of the modern economy after 1863, being exported to pay for the import of necessary machineries, right, and industrial raw materials. This was supplemented by sorry. This was supplemented by direct importation of capital from abroad. Like, remember I said before, um, this
Mm-hmm.
was supplemented by the direct importation of capital from abroad, especially from Belgium and France, while much of the capital, especially for railroads, was provided for the government. Now, the reason why I put that that part there is that the access to capital, like when the author is talking, or when you read it throughout it, the access to capital when they're talking about it is the resources, whether it's the raw materials aspect, right, or
Mm-hmm.
the human labor who has the professional experience to be able to develop the machineries. Like later on, I want to speak about the OPP agenda, how it is relevant by providing capital, like those two things I told you about. That's how these things were able to, how these countries were able to pull themselves out of those debt by having that type of relationship where a country like Belgium or France providing the capital to Russia to be able to develop itself into the country what it became, or at least in the 1800s or the 1900s, stuff like that. That's how it operates. But I was going to find other examples, but that's kind of the reason why I wanted to show that example and how this same method was applied in China too, where like in to use China as a more recent example, where China was able to be able to develop itself by loans or debt that America gave it to them, or technology transfer that they were able to get from them. So and because they were able to train their people, like in terms of human capital, where they train engineers, they train different different skill sets and stuff like that to be able to build their manufacturing capacity. So once they build their manufacturing capacity, they were able to be able to loan out to get pay. I'm sorry, to loan to sell stuff in the foreign market through their production, get access to U.S. dollars or foreign currency, and then just use that same money to go buy or to get more to get more let's say engineers or be able to train people. Like I'm not sure if you're familiar with how a lot of Chinese students come from China to come over here to be able to get skill sets and then go back home and stuff like that, right? That's kind of
Mm-hmm.
how that's how it operates. And by doing that, it's by training your population or your people to keep doing that, to develop the manufacturing capacity to be able to produce these things, to get, like I just said, more currency, more foreign currency to be able to get access to whether it's the U.S. market or the Euro market to be able to develop itself. So that's why I just use that example, the small example. There's more examples little than this book, but I'm just using that as an example. So, yeah. So
Okay.
hopefully you guys get the idea of what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying. So
Mm,
basically, just going back to what I was saying before about the powers and
yeah.
how basically it's about, having control over resources and wealth
Hmm.
and um just basically having power, wealth, and prestige. So that's what I
Hmm.
learned in college: power, wealth, and prestige. But basically, yeah, that's
Exactly.
what it's really about: just gaining some type of control over resources. That's it.
Yeah.
Um,
But the
yeah.
challenges, But the challenge is that as a people is that getting access to those resources when it's under the control of our enemies that's the problem. That's the problem. And then also you have a propped up bourgeoisie, whether it's in Africa, whether it's African leaders who's doing it, or let's say like the CBC or like these kind of integrationists, Negroes and stuff like that. They've got a power or a check on the people where they can allow, particularly in Africa, because it's more relevant in Africa, how they can continue to allow the foreign powers like Britain, France, the Western powers, or even China and stuff like that, to be able to get influence and be able to continue their extraction process and be able to stuff like that. So that's why it's so difficult for our people to be able to do it um, at this time right now. So that's kind of the problem. But yeah, I cut
Yeah.
you off.
Oh, you good? You good? Yes, yes.
Mm.
I'm with you on that. I'm with you. Yes, because I noticed there is a lot of foreigners, especially Chinese people, going over there to Africa. Going
Mhm.
in there trying to gain control over a lot of resources because
Mhm.
Africa is considered as the richest continent in the world. And by being the richest continent, it's a lot of natural resources over there.
Mhm.
So it's going to attract other continents and other countries to come
Mhm.
and take over the sources there. Whether it be the continent of Europe, the continent of Asia, especially those two continents. They'll come in, they'll grab what they want, get what they want, and they see it as a way of making profit. And
Mhm.
so yes, I'm with you,
And
and
yeah, and and the reason why they're doing this is also because it's not. It's also because they want to compete too. Because countries like China and Russia or even India stuff like that, because there's a lot of Indians also too, who's on the continent and stuff like that. They're all trying to, from a geopolitical perspective, trying to compete with the U.S. or the West to get access or to be able to become that next superpower or stuff like that, or the next imperial power, or if they're not trying to, they're trying to maintain their power, at least to at least maintain their power. So by getting access to African resources, the cobalt, the ores, and all these type of things that contribute to what we have in our on our phones or what we use as weapons and stuff like that. That if you read this book, it all confirms why we're doing the OPP agenda of how this all builds power politically, economically, militarily, politically, and all stuff like that. So that's kind of how power is thing. So that's kind of why I kind of like got me on this thing. So because I've been researching the idea of what is Black Power and how do you develop that, and through this history and then through reading these different type of books, this is kind of like where I got to the conclusion where we can be able to build actual Black Power, not just theoretical or stuff like that, but actual Black Power. That's the idea.
wow, that's a lot.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great book, but that's a lot of information in that book for one to be able to,
No,
to intake because
yeah,
you really
because it
have to
took me
take
like
your
two
time
months, man.
reading it. Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
because like it took me like 2 months. Like, I'm almost finished. I'm almost finished. I only got like this small part like right here. This small part to read. Bullshit. I only got this small part to read, but it took me like 2 months
Wow.
to read it. But it was still worth it because it confirmed basically what I already been saying, what the OPP agenda and why we're doing stuff like that. Because it goes through not just the history of capitalism from the different stages where there's mercantile capitalism, whether it's financial capitalism, whether it's monopoly capitalism, stuff like that. He all like when you go through the book, he describes the thing, and then also he also describes how it all coalesced amongst the banks also too, like how the bankers and the globalists all control these type of things, and how the value of currency even operates too. Because in the Federal Reserve book, I figured that out too. But also he just kind of reaffirms this in the book too. Also, like in this book, where how it all coalesce amongst each other to be able to build power and stuff like that. So that's why I keep sending you like snippets of the book and stuff like that to kind of give you an idea, about things. Hmm.
Okay. Now, I want to talk to you about Grenada because you said your parents are from the country of Grenada, correct?
Yeah.
All right,
Hmm.
so let's talk a little bit about Maurice Bishop and Grenada. So Maurice Bishop was one of the prime minister at the time period, but before him there was another prime minister. However, uh, Maurice Bishop and his organization had
The new
overthrown
Jew
that
movement.
prime minister because they felt like that the prime minister was very corrupted to the people, and he was not doing anything that was meeting the people's need. So when Maurice overthrew him, he took
Mhm.
over from there. So let's go into a little bit about the history about the Grenadian people, but well, about the Grenadian government and Maurice Bishop. Tell me what you know about that.
Yeah. So to my knowledge, and that's actually ironic because this past weekend I just read a book on Morris Bishop about the assassination of Bishop, stuff like that. So my history, I think the history of Grenada kind of parallels a lot of the history of Jamaica and all the different type of islands and stuff like that. It comes similar history with the slave trade and all stuff like that. Um, the purpose of Grenada was primarily to produce sugar, nutmeg, and certain different type of spices and stuff like that. And then it was kind of imported into the European economy. If my memory is correct, it was originally colonized by the Spanish first, then briefly by the French, and then later on it was colonized by the British in the 1700s, stuff like that, or 1800s. And they only got their independence in the 1970s, in the late 1970s, I believe. That was when they were able to get their independence. But when it comes to particularly when it comes to Bishop, what Bishop and his comrades in the New Jew movement, that's what it was called, um, they were kind of overthrowing a dictator, kind of like a pseudo dictator. His name was Eric Gary, if I remember correctly. They overthrew him because they were trying to get him. They were trying to organize the people to be able to get him out of power, to like do voting or stuff like that. But because he kept rigging the process, kind of like how dictators do, he kept doing the same thing. So there was one time in 1979 where they were able to catch him outside of the country, where they were able to take over the government, and it was kind of like a bloodless revolution where only one person lost their life. I think, if I'm correct on that. So that's kind of how the revolution happened. Now the prop now this is kind of go back to what I was talking about, the Marxist aspect, where the organization was kind of founded on a Marxist-Leninist concept, where they were focused on building collectively ownership of the people, stuff like that. Even though technically, in practice, they weren't actually doing that because the people didn't really get access, or the members of the party didn't actually have a vote on it, or like overall they didn't have like a national elections yet. Because once Morris Bishop became leader, there was no national elections yet. It was mostly just a transition period where Bishop and the NJM, or the New Jew movement, they were kind of primarily operating. But the problem is that you heard of a guy named Bernard Cord?
Bernard Court.
Cord, yeah. He was part of the organization. He was part of the he was kind of like second in command in the
I think so,
organization.
yeah. Because I
Yeah.
did a video on Maurice Bishop a while back. But
Yeah.
I think I came across a name.
I seen the video too. I seen the
Yeah.
video too. So the guy named Bernard Cord, he was kind of like the second in command in the NJM. He was primarily like the organizer. He was kind of the one who kind of gave the ideology of the political training. So that's kind of what his role is. But what Bishop was, and based on the book I was reading, is that he was more of a spokesman who kind of like helped mobilize the people. Like when I say mobilize, like as in like give speeches, be able to engage the people and spread the message and stuff like that of the people. Now, what happened is that as time went on, the pressures of having to develop the government, right? Depending on Cuban aid, or like the Soviet Union for aid, and the pressures that the U.S. government was putting under the New Jew movement, what happened was is that the pressure started getting to the head of a lot of the leaders in the group, particularly someone like Bernard Cord, who was having certain issues within the group where he kind of had certain aspirations where he wanted to be the leader of the group, but he wasn't really explicitly stating it, but he was kind of indirectly having his advocates within the group doing it for him. And then over time, because of certain friction, it would take me too long to explain. But basically, what happened is that there was a proposal where people within the group were saying that they wanted a joint leadership in an organization, right? They wanted a joint leadership between Bishop and Cord, because it would be more effective for Cord to be the organizer, to be able to do things and have say in the directing process, and then also have Bishop continue his role, doing the speeches, doing stuff like that, right? But historically, when you have typically you would have one leader. You know what I'm saying? You would have one leader who's doing the work and stuff like that, right? Who's kind of like doing the policies and stuff like that. But the problem is that what Bishop was having is that there's no real precedent where you would have two leaders of a country. You know what I'm saying? So what the party was suggesting, or what not even just the party, but particularly the central leadership of a certain small minority, right? They were the ones who were pushing this central. I'm sorry, they were pushing the joint leadership. But what happened is that because Bishop was going back and forth about the idea of joint leadership, the paranoia amongst the Cord faction, Bernard Cord faction, where they think that he's not going to accept it and stuff like that. And then there's certain rumors spreading where Bishop may assassinate Cord and stuff like that because he doesn't want to accept the thing. There's certain rumors and certain stuff are going on like that. So as time went on, there was certain rumors and certain things that kept going on and on and on, and it got to the point to where the Cord faction arrested Bishop, he and his crew and stuff like that. And then eventually, over the course of a couple of days, they assassinated them. They assassinated them in Grenada. And Cord took over the country briefly until later on when the U.S. troop came in and stuff like that and did what they did. So that's kind of like a long version of what happened and stuff like that. That's kind of what happened in Grenada. So after that, they got arrested, Cord and they got arrested, and some of them was executed, but most of the Grenada 17 they went to jail, stuff like that. So that's kind of what the story of what happened with Morris Bishop and then the organization, stuff like that. And then there's certain critiques I have to give about the organization also too, but that's kind of the overall thing. But go ahead.
Okay, wow. Uh, yeah, that's a lot of information. That's a lot of great information. So yeah, that's the history behind the scene. Well, people, what's the pros and cons of doing revolutionary work or activism work? That's my last
Mm,
question, boy.
yeah. Um. And it's a little complicated to answer that question because you can have a revolution, right? But the problem is that being able to sustain the revolution, particularly like in relation to the book, what I just mentioned, there are several different economic problems that the Grenadian government, not just Grenada, because something is very similar to Cuba too, where they had a revolution, but to sustain the revolution because they don't have access to certain economic or military resources, they were largely dependent on either the Soviet Union or other people, or other organizations, or other countries to be able to provide that type of support. So even if you overthrow a government, right? Like let's use Haiti as an example, right? If you overthrow the existing power structure that's already there, and then you don't have the necessary infrastructure to be able to sustain the revolution or to be able to develop yourself and stuff like that, these are the same problems that Haiti saw and then also African countries saw in the post-colonial era, where they don't have access to their own resources. So, similar to how I said how they don't have access to certain personnel, like in like the Russian example I just gave a while ago, about how they don't have access to certain capital or certain human resources to be able to develop themselves. This, this is the similar problem that happened in Grenada and in Cuba, where they don't have the actual certain things. So that there's going to be pressure on leadership to be able to get access to what I said before, foreign currency, to be able to develop themselves. But because you're under the thumb of the United States, where they're putting pressure or embargoes and stuff like that, you cannot be able to develop yourselves and stuff like that. So that's why the tricky part of revolution is that it's one thing to overthrow a government and stuff like that, but the process of being able to provide the material needs that the people need is the difficult part because it's not necessarily easy to do that. If I hope you answered the question a little bit.
Okay, yeah, yeah, you did. You really answered the question. Well, all right
Yeah.
then, brother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, all right, brother. It's great to have you on here. I really appreciate it a lot. I love this dialogue that we're having.
Mm-hmm.
So where can people go and find out more information about your organization?
Yeah. So you can you see if you guys see it on the screen, it says ogpeoples.org/join. You can join the organization, or you could click the about page or like the agenda page, and then you can go through the agenda from the worker cooperatives, infra project, and the currency. The worker cooperative model is going to be something that's going to be an alternative model of capitalism, where there's going to be collectively owned businesses where the people have a say in the governance of the business. Number one, and number two, they're able to share the profits of the overall business that they're operating in. Number one. Number two, be able to develop our own machinery and supply chain to be able to produce the things that we need without having to go into deep debt, stuff like that. By having those machineries under our control, that's going to be number two. And then number three, by having our own currency, we'll be able to finance these different activities ourselves without having to depend on the banks, stuff like that, by creating our own currency. So that's kind of the ideal of the original People's Party and the agenda. So if you want to join, you could join at ogpeoples.org/join, or you can follow me on Twitter on Deshawn Coy. No spaces or nothing like that. Deshawn Coy, you can follow me, or look me up on Facebook and stuff like that. So or go on the website and then you can email me. So definitely.
All right, then. Also, the title of your book. You have the book in handy, right?
Yeah. From
Okay,
the
so
ashes. From the
the
ashes.
name of the book is called "From Ashes to Black Liberation." From Ashes to
Mm-hmm.
Black Liberation, and it can be found on Amazon. So also
Yep.
check out that book. Support his book. I gotta give me a physical copy because the copy that I have on Kindle. But yeah,
Yeah.
the
Trust me, you're gonna love it.
yep. So
The book,
check
the
it
book
out.
for me personally, I like reading the book because I can't sit down on my phone and just like read the stuff. You know what I'm saying? You gotta go
Yeah,
through it because if you go through
yeah.
my books and stuff like that, right? And I marked it all over these books. So that's why you gotta get the physical copies, man. You definitely get
Oh
the
yeah,
physical
yeah.
copies.
I mean, normally I have a bunch of physical copies of books, but I also keep books on my PDF because when I'm always on the go, like when I'm at work or
Exactly.
something, and I need a
Yeah.
material to read, I'll just read from my phone. I don't really like looking at reading from my phone like that, but I
Hmm.
just it's just
Yeah.
something that will
And then
keep me
also,
busy. If I'm happen to be bored, if I'm on break or something.
yeah. And then this book is also 100 pages, so it's easy to read. It's nothing crazy. It's not like this book. This book is like 10,000 pages. Like.
Yes, I seen that. I said, "Whoa!"
Yeah.
I said,
So it's
"Whoa!"
easy to read. So definitely.
I
Uh-huh.
said, "Whoa!" I said that. Yeah, I said that's a lot of information. Thank you, Centavo. I really appreciate that. Yeah, shout out to
Hmm.
Centavo. Thank you. Thank you, Bakari, brother Bakari. Thank you. Thank you for everybody that's in the chat, that's on here, that's watching. Please make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Also share the channel, and make sure you check out the content that's on here, and also support the brother Deshawn Coy. Um, so you
Hmm.
also, I know you got Facebook,
On
and
Twitter.
you have what is it called? The Clubhouse.
Oh,
Where you
Clubhouse.
just
Yeah.
yeah, you just started a Clubhouse.
You,
Do you
you,
have an Instagram or
yeah. The same name, Deshaun Coy. Are you doing any Clubhouse meetings soon?
um I haven't came up with something. Yeah, I'm thinking about it, but
Mm,
I have to try. Yeah, I'm trying to come up with something for the Clubhouse. Yeah.
yeah.
So
Just let me
okay.
know when you
Yeah.
get the next one.
Oh yeah. Also, everybody, if you guys on Clubhouse, make sure you check me out. My Clubhouse. As a matter of fact, let me pull my information up. Let me pull this information up. So my Clubhouse information is Tip French, as you can see. So if you got a Clubhouse, also check me out on there as well. I have a group, or I mean, what do they call it? A chat room. I have a chat room called Afro Dialogue. So the
Yeah.
Afro Dialogue
I'm
room
following
is
the page.
yeah. So the Afro Dialogue Room is basically, where people that are of African descent, regardless where you are nationally, whether you be in the United States of America, the continent of Africa, the Caribbeans, the UK or whatnot, we all have a space where we can have a dialogue, talk about history, science, psychology, social science, current events, or any type of miscellaneous topics. Yeah, so I have a room for that. I have to. I have been in the room for like, let's see, I have started maybe like two subjects in the room. Like I have talked about two subjects on there.
Mm.
So
I really like the topic. I really like the topic that we had about the conscious community and stuff like that. So I really like that. I really like that discussion about the Nation of Islam and all these different type of religious groups and stuff like that. That was kind of like
yeah,
a really dope conversation. I think we should have another live stream or something like that where we will all have like like a panel. I'm thinking that could be really dope too.
yeah, yeah. So it's a lot of things yeah that I'm working on. So I'm working on trying to do more with the Clubhouse. I'm still new to it, just like you is. I haven't been
Yeah.
on there for that long, so I'm still trying to get familiarized. But it's a lot of you'll meet a lot of different people on Clubhouse, and
Hey, I know.
you'll meet some interesting people. And I met some interesting people on Clubhouse. Uh,
Yeah, I feel you.
yeah.
I feel you. Yeah, but definitely.
People
So
that talk
these
about
things
the
will take time.
indigenous, they're indigenous, the FBAs. Oh my God, so many of them. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Just invite me when the next time you see that stuff because I want to engage with these guys too. Too.
Okay
Hmm.
then. All right. Well, I thank you, Brother Deshawn. And again, you guys, make sure you
Hmm.
check out his book, which is From Ashes to Black Liberation. So please
Hmm.
check that book out. It's on Amazon.
Thank you. Thank you.
Be on the lookout for that, or you can download the Kindle. And also make
Hmm.
sure if you guys want to join the OG People's Party, you check out his website, which is ogspeople.org. And also you can reach out to him on Facebook if you have a Facebook account, or Instagram, or Twitter, or any of those social media platforms. You guys can reach out to him, so that
Yeah.
way you guys
I want to
can
thank
get
before we
started.
get off.
So
I
how
would say
often?
thank.
How many?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Tiffany, for allowing me on your platform. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. How many times a week do you have your meeting?
Usually on Wednesday, well, we were doing it on Wednesdays, but we're gonna shift some Sundays. So like hopefully when someone like off work, so we're gonna be doing it on Wednesdays typically with members and supporters and stuff like that. So we're gonna shift to that to do it like on time. So definitely. So if anyone wants to join and stuff like that, or you want to just listen to our live stream and stuff like that, we don't do it live on live stream, but we do have like a Zoom call where we all talk and stuff like that, and then give updates and stuff like that.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. All right then. Well, thank you so much
Well, thank
again.
you,
And
Tiffany.
all right. And then I hope you have a good one. And I'm looking to talk to you later.
All right, cool, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate the audience joining us. All right,
All right then. Peace.
take care. Take care.
Peace. Power. All right then. So you guys, thank you guys for tuning in, and I really appreciate that a lot. So make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, share this channel. If you like the channel, make sure you share the channel. Check out the content. Um, Deontay. Hey Stefan, how you doing? What's up, Stefan? Thank you for coming through. All right, so yeah, make sure you check out the channel. Make sure you hit the notification bell and share the channel, share the video content, and also, like I said, check out Brother Deshawn Coy. He's on Facebook, he's on Instagram, he's on Twitter, and he also on Clubhouse. So if anybody else is on Clubhouse, make sure you follow me on there as well. So it's Tip French, TIPFRENCH, Tip French. So yeah, I'm just trying to get familiarized with the Clubhouse thing, and um, yeah, I'm trying to get familiarized with the Clubhouse. Yeah, I'm still learning my way around, so it's pretty new to me. But other than that, you guys, I will connect with you all later. So please take it easy. Please be careful because we're still in this pandemic. We're still dealing with the COVID, and we're dealing with a new strain now called the Delta variant. So y'all, please take it easy. Make sure you wear your mask, get vaccinated, all that good stuff. If you're not gonna get vaccinated, please wear your mask. All right, no, like seriously, wear your mask. Yeah. So yes, Centavo, it is crazy on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is off the chain. But other than that, peace. And also make sure you check out Team Osiris channel. Check out the new Team Osiris channel, which is Team Osiris on the Horizon. And also check out Old Descent of Mali. Shout out to the brothers, Brother Malik Kamara, Brother Carlos, Brother Geechee. They doing a thing on there. Check out that channel. And yeah, support the channel and whatnot. So make sure you check out the contents on there as well. And also check out Brother Hero Jones, Brother Hero GMR Jones. He does his thing on there. So he gets into a lot about the neuroscience, consciousness, meditation, etc. So support his channel as well. All right. I'm about to go ahead and log off. And that's it.